I would like to introduce the moderator for the first session of Demystifying mDLs, Tom Suter, the CEO, Advanced Technologies Academic Research Center.
Thanks so much, Darlene. If my panel can come up, we've got one remote. And thanks to Laura Stanton, Larry Hale, Darlene, of course, and Charmaine, who's really been working behind the scenes making this go. And we didn't have to do too much. She organized most of everything. Before we get into it, just a little bit about ATARC. We're the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. We've been bringing government, industry, and academia together, and we love our partnership with GSA. And I think I'm looking back on my career, we started in mobile. You know, when we're all on BlackBerries and flip phones, it's kind of hard to do the identity management that we would need to do what we're talking about today. And then the cloud emerges, and then, identity management, modern identity management. We've done a lot of work around there. So here we are today to talk about mobile driver's licenses. So what we're going to do is I'm going to briefly introduce everybody. And we'll just do basic introductions and a little bit about your bio. Then we're going to go to the results of a survey that GSA did. And we got some pretty significant participation there, mostly government. And then we're going to kick things off with Ryan, who's going to kind of go us through some of the basics that NIST has been doing. But if we could just go through the panel. And then we also have George online. How about we start off with you, George, if you could introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. I'm the George Peterson, the Senior Program Manager for the Real ID program at the Transportation Security Administration. TSA administers Real ID. And I just can't thank everybody enough for coming here today. This is demanded, requested by the federal agencies to learn more, and I can't thank GSA enough for their efforts in putting together this fabulous venue and this opportunity to get everybody together. And of course, all of our presenters and the people that are contributing to this, thank you very much. But
Great.
Yes, I'm Real ID and look forward.
Yep, and thank you for being able to join us. I think it was essential. Next, we'll go with Mike. Just a quick intro.
Michael McCaskill. I'm the Identity Management Vice President at the American Association of Motor Vehicles Administrators.
Great. Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Purdy, Managing Partner at Barrington Transformation Services.
Ryan Galuzzo. I am the Identity Program Lead for NIST Applied Cybersecurity Division.
John Frisbee. I'm the lead of the Biometrics and Identity Technology Center at the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate.
Okay. I think we got all the introductions out of the way, and let's go to the survey that GSA produced. Can we move on to that? Just some basics. I didn't do the survey, but it's most of the participants were federal government. And having done surveys, that's really hard to do, to get people to respond. But it tells you a little bit about the passion that we have in this area and as many people we're going to have involved with this today. So mostly federal government. Next slide. And it's a little bit, lots of different things, but I'll have my panel talk about it a little bit. But people like to have their ID, the mobile ID, to go verify themselves, right? It just is convenient and then online. But I'm just going to open up to my panel. What strikes you about this survey? We'll go right into it before we get started in the discussion.
I mean, I think the big thing was that, and one of the reasons we decided to start with kind of a level setting conversation was within the context of the survey, about 50% of the people who responded basically said, I don't really know anything about mobile driver's license at all. And then there were some folks who are like, I've heard it, but I don't really understand it. So one of the reasons that we are, starting with this demystifying mobile driver's license conversation is because even though as I look across the room today, there's probably a lot of people that this will be a little bit redundant for. There's also a lot of people out there beyond our kind of core community of identity folks that don't really know what we're talking about. There's everything from is it just a picture of my driver's license on my phone, to the how does this thing even function and operate? So I think being able to establish that level setting conversation, and at least for the rest of today, be able to make sure that folks are building off of a common understanding of the core concepts and the core functionality, I think is really important. We're not going to get into the nuances of all the cryptographic algorithms used and all that other stuff, but being able to at least establish a core understanding of what these things are, how they function, how they operate, I think is an important thing. And it was kind of proven out by where we saw those numbers land when it came to the survey itself.
Yeah. I figure somebody from this, you love talking about algorithms and cryptographic algorithms. So that'll be
don't.
tough for you.
There's lots of, I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a cryptographer. If you want someone to talk about that, I can connect you with folks, but that's not my sweet spot.
Yep. Any other comments from anybody? Well, before we get going? We'll get this out, Charmaine, and we're going to get this out to all the recipients to analyze. So maybe we'll start off with you, Ryan. Just some of the basics. What are we talking, just to define what we're trying to do. What are we demystifying?
Yeah, and I think we have slides. Maybe
We have a slide.
Hopefully we have slides,
Sure.
possibly. There we go.
There we go.
All right. So any of you who have joined our many wonderful NIST discussions of mobile driver's license, some work we do in the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, will probably recognize some of these slides. We wanted to start with kind of just a very, very basic understanding. What are these things? We're not going to get into a ton of detail about how they function, how they operate. Those are things that we'll get elaborated on as we go today. But a lot of times we have conversations with people and we say, hey, do you have a mobile driver's license? And they're like, I don't know what that is. Is that the same thing as when I take a picture of my driver's license and I show it to my bank? Is this just a thing that I flash in front of people? And so there's a lot of folks out there who maybe have heard the term, maybe have heard the acronym, but they don't really understand what it is. And honestly, it's actually a fairly straightforward concept, right? We're taking that physical driver's license that you typically get from the DMV, and we're creating a digital format, right? And that digital format carries with it certain features, capabilities, characteristics that distinguish it from your typical physical driver's license, right? A lot of times what we do today, we heard earlier folks saying, hey, I have to take a picture of my driver's license to open my bank account or to do whatever it is, right? We're looking to try and distill in those processes trust from physical security and physical integrity features that were designed to help convey trust in a physical, tactile way. So what we want to try and do is replicate those same abilities, or in most cases do it better, to improve the way we actually can verify the information, the way we can prove that these things are real. And that's all typically done through this concept of cryptography and public key cryptography. So what is your mDL? It's literally your driver's license conveyed into your phone. And it's got all the same elements, sometimes even more, but it carries all that same data. The big difference is that this is protected by public key cryptography, right? So it's signed by the issuing source. What does that mean? You know that when the DMV verified that information, confirmed it was true, they packaged that up and they put their digital signature on it to say, this is really true information about Ryan. And that gives you the ability to understand, number one, that it came from the issuing source, which gives you a lot of confidence in the accuracy of the information. But number two, it also allows you to understand that it hasn't been modified, changed, or tampered with throughout the course of that flight. Number two, it's user controlled. It's on your phone. If you want to present it, you can. If you don't want to present it, you don't have to. So it gives, it takes and starts to establish that paradigm of the individual being able to present that driver's license where they want to do it, how they want to do it, whether physical or in person. Again, cryptographically verified and signed by the issuer. It gives you that integrity and the confidence that you can't get right now, particularly in digital transactions when you're attempting to leverage and create trust off of physical things that were never meant to be used in digital manners. These are linked to a single device in the core standard for mobile driver's license. That is very important because it means that is not going to go to 5, 10, 12, 18 different phones. It is cryptographically bound to the device that is issued to, and that is where it operates, functions, and how it's protected. And then finally, it can be used in person, online, right? We've talked a little bit about TSA. We've talked a little bit about online use cases. At the end of the day, the intent is to have a very valuable, flexible credential that can be used regardless of whether you're going to TSA or the airport or your local bar, or whether you're going to, to go online to establish an online account, whether it's for benefits or services, for financial services. One last thing that I didn't really mention is the other thing that's very important about these. In establishing the credential, they allow for a concept known as selective disclosure, right? So right now, if you go take a picture of your driver's license in order to open your bank account, that financial institution gets all of the information that's on that driver's license, things like your height, your weight, your eye color. This is unnecessary information for that financial institution to establish the account. So through selective disclosure, you can reveal only what that financial institution needs to actually establish that account, right? So it allows for greater privacy in online use cases than we're able to support today.
Well, the good news is I've been carded in a bar in a while, so anyway.
Despite the beard, I still
Yeah,
get carded from time
there
to
you
time,
go.
so.
Great. Let's go to Mike. And Mike, you're representing, the Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. Love to hear your perspective on your side of the table.
So Ryan did a very good job of telling you what MDL is. I'm going to give you where it came from. So we do represent all of the DMVs in North America, and that means that we bring them together to talk about their needs in an issue, whether it be car design, and in this case, it happens to be a digital credential. Many years ago, we started that working group, and that group got together and said, we need these things to happen so that we can ensure that our customers, their privacy is respected, that they can use it anywhere they need to use it, and that it's interoperable. And so that group got together, built requirements around those particular topics. Those requirements were then given to the ISO group that built the 18013 standard. And why did I stop at 18013 and not say part 5 or part 7? Well, the 18013 standard is actually the physical card standard. Every one of you in your wallets today have a physical driver license, and it's built off of that standard. And in building the mobile credential or the digital driver license, we use that same standard and built part 5 for in-person use and part 7 for over the internet use. Part 6 will actually be the testing harnesses around how to test the part 7 functionality. So the states, since they are the issuers of the identity in the United States, are the ones who needed to be sure that the credential that they were going to be issuing was safe, secure, privacy preserving, and all those things that you need it to be, so that it can mimic the use of the physical card. So we started building that out. ISO began work on that particular Part 5 standard, and then it was published a couple of years ago for the first time. But we were integral, the states were integral in figuring out what needed to happen so that what Ryan described to you could actually come to fruition and be used. And he mentioned cryptography. AMVA sits in the middle of all of this in this sense. Relying parties need a way to ensure that the public keys they're using to authenticate mDLs issued by jurisdictions are the true public keys that are needed. So what AMVA did was we stood up a digital trust service, and it basically is a public key list where we go out and obtain the actual public key from the jurisdiction in person. There's a very regimented process that we go through to ensure that we're dealing with the right people, that we get the right key, and then we upload that key into our digital trust service. From there, relying parties can connect to that service, download all of those keys, provision them into their readers so that they can authenticate mDLs from all of those jurisdictions. The reason that's important is if we didn't do that, the relying parties would have to go to each individual issuing authority, make sure that they're talking to the right people, make sure that they get the right key, that they're actually on an issuing authority's website to actually pull down that public key. And all of that takes time, all of that takes effort, and all of that takes money. And so we wanted to be sure that they trust, and trust is a key component here, trust that the mDL that they were interacting with was issued by an issuing authority to the person standing in front of them, and that the data hasn't changed since it was issued. And the digital trust service provides that avenue for relying parties. So AMVA has been integral in providing all of the services needed to build out this standard from standards that AMVA was already involved in originally. And now the 14 states that have issued are issuing on that standard. And all of North America is committed to issuing mDLs based on this standard. And why is that important? Interoperability. Trust and interoperability are paramount and to ensure that digital credentials can be used across North America and globally. You're going to hear some of that today. So we've done our very best to ensure trust and ensure that the ecosystem can build itself out in a way that makes sense and provides the services that our citizens, our folks need, that our customers need to use the MDL as Ryan has described.
And I kind of learned that about the interoperability aspect when I downloaded my Virginia ID. I did not know we had, until we got to this panel, I did not know Virginia had a program. So I downloaded the digital license. I, did all that. I went to the airport. Of course, it didn't work in San Diego. So we have to get the interoperability fixed. Next, let's go with George, and a senior program manager, Real ID. And of course, it's very timely to have you here, George, since it's become mandatory at the airports, and I've seen some of the effects of that. Let us know a little bit more about the program and what you all are trying to do.
Oh, thank you very much. So far, what you've heard is like digital ID has these technical requirements that make it incredibly secure and help protect your privacy, and standards help provide interoperability. And especially with Mike, when he said that there's an ecosystem that supports this. It's a collaboration effort between states and the technology providers, and a goal to provide a secure credential for our citizens. So the goal of the Real ID program is, when Real ID, Congress passed Real ID, the whole purpose is to ensure a high level of identity assurance to protect citizens and infrastructure from terrorists or other attack. The MDL and digital IDs in general, the concept of them, support this to the maximum. And so the government's role in this really has been to, be the government aspect of this collaboration effort to help build the trust that Mike had referred to. And so the Real ID, when we developed our rulemaking, what it does is it performs a regulatory structure in which the states would operate within issuing, the mobile driver's licenses. And that helps to build public trust too, because you go through a rulemaking process. It's very public. Everybody has opportunities to comment. We responded to those. And more importantly, what we did is we did a multiple phase rulemaking, which facilitates the implementation of a very secure, interoperable framework right now that supports all the goals that Mike and has talked about, while also facilitating, continued investment, growth within the industry, innovation. And then when we move to our second phase rulemaking, we'll incorporate our lessons learned and the additional standards that have been published since the first rulemaking. So Real ID is supporting this in a manner that facilitates, our ability to meet, the intent of Congress to protect our citizens, while leveraging all the incredible work that AMVA has done to develop this mobile driver's license, and also the other types of innovations that are happening within digital identity, as verifiable credentials become more robust and provide other types of opportunities. You'll be hearing about those later. So the role of the program really is to ensure that, the public can trust this because there's a regulatory framework that is responsive to both the states, the industry, and the public's concerns for security, privacy, as well as ensuring that there's interoperability. So it's sort of like we're joining that and supporting it, and we want to help ensure that we're sort of the backbone on which everything can continue to flourish as it has. That's sort of the role of the program. I also wanted to touch on some of the use cases. As Mike has already pointed out, mobile driver's license it's basically encrypted, so it's very secure. Mobile driver's license accepted at over 250 airports. It's going to be rolled out soon. So even to more airports, we have over 450 airports at which TSA is responsible for security screening. And the ability for someone to use the phone increases our level of identity assurance at the checkpoint. So it's something that is good for travelers because it's very quick, it's very reliable, and we know it's incredibly secure. That's it for right now. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you for that, George. And next, we're going to go to a sister component, DHS Science and Technology, Jonathan Prisby.
Good morning. Thank you. DHS, I think, is the largest verifier of human identity kind of in the country, at least certainly in the government. And George has already sort of covered some of the TSA use cases. Additionally, there's online, so right to work, anytime you start a new job, there's a thing called I-9 we've probably been through. Entering this building, you go through Federal Protective Service, where we've got to enter a secure federal facility, obviously tied into kind of Real ID. There's also benefits grants for FEMA disaster assistance. And the more I've sort of dug inside DHS, the more I'm just finding, usually at some process when we hire a new employee, there's background checks and things that need to begin. And all of it, usually the first question comes down to is, who is this person that I'm dealing with? And mobile driving licenses are key. And the reason is, I think, for what everyone's already covered, is this is really a socio-technical problem, which gets to, well, why do we use a document for a purpose? And generally, it's because, well, someone along the way historically has chosen to accept it, or a law, a regulation, a policy, or some combination thereof has said it's okay to accept it. There's also been a big difference between sufficiency for process or legal sufficiency, because it's in a law, regulation, policy, versus, well, how strong is that document? How verifiable can it be? When I was sort of doing some work looking for examples here, payments have often gone first. I would bet that probably most people in the room have probably used a credit card reader or debit card reader at some point. What we don't do with payment credentials is, if you want to use it online, you don't take a photograph of the front and the back of your credit card and then send it to Amazon.com. We generally do it differently, because I think, looking at public stats, 9 out of 10 fraudulent transactions online are when we enter these static identifiers that are really, really easy to copy and paste. And mobile driving licenses can do, especially online, what some of the digital wallets, tokenization, have already done for payments. And if you look at the experience of tap to pay online, you just sort of confirm with the app and click. That is very similar to the experience of, I think, what you'll see with some of the vendors here today. And I think where we're going, where it may not matter kind of the background and the technical efforts to get it there. It can take a decade to ultimately make it work. But the experience for the user can be simple, streamlined, secure, private. And I'd say the role that I'd say DHS broadly has is, because we serve as a verifier for so many different things. And S&T's role was, how do we help prepare the department for the future? Because we will need to accept these digital versions of physical credentials, kind of because that's how we accept processes today. So we can either kind of engage with the community, try to make it work well, which can take, years, upwards of a decade in this case, or we can kind of wait and then be surprised ultimately when industry and other things shift.
Great. Thank you for that. Next, I have a few questions. We're going to get to the audience here. Oh yeah, I forgot my industry person. Sorry about that, Steve. So Steve, you're looking at me real funny. So Steve, you're our industry participant here. How we talked about the integration. It's difficult, right? And that's some of the things that you're going to work on, but I'd love to hear your opening comments about how we're going to do this transition.
Sure.
Yep.
So, I love being in this subject area about MDL. And when I listened to Stephen and Laura open up the session and talking about the transformational nature that MDL has, the potential that it has, that's really the vision, right? When MDL was first introduced, really the use cases, and Mike touched upon it in the -5, was really taking a digital version and managing the same use cases that you do a physical credential, opening up a bank account, proving my age, renting a car, right? How many times have we gone in to a service area and basically handed over our driver's license and they scan it and keep a copy on file? They don't need all of that information. The privacy aspect of MDL is really critical, as Mike had mentioned. But there's another component also, and I'm not sure if all of you are aware, I'm sure it's been in the paper a lot, but the attack that U.S. jurisdictions are under with regards to fraudulent documents coming in from China is a real issue. Jurisdictions are investing a tremendous amount of money in adding security features to their credential, and the Chinese are continuing to try to keep up with that. The MDL also adds an additional advantage of providing a verification of the genuineness of the credential. So it's not just a privacy aspect, it's also the security aspect of the credential. But the unfortunate part is when you talk about where can I physically use my physical driver's license, I've been around long enough and I've been around the early days of PIV. It's the same challenges with PIV. The infrastructure, having an investment in an infrastructure that's going to be able to read and verify that credential is a challenge. A lot of people talk about where can I use it? That's part of the issue. Now with -7, that is where the digital credential really transcends what the physical driver's license can do. It's the online verification, and with governments under constant pressure on budgets, hiring, this is an opportunity to really keep up with ongoing challenges on ensuring customer satisfaction and convenient services. So from a vendor perspective, you're dealing in a situation where jurisdictions really need help. They're excellent in executing how to get your driver's license, how to maintain safe roads, safe driving conditions, but this is a transformational technology, and it's really up to the vendor community to start to invest and to assist in developing applications to really drive adoption. I think that's really where the challenge is. It's complicated from an infrastructure standpoint for sure, but that investment really needs, and the vision needs to be created on how
Yeah.
to be implemented.
What lessons can we learn? I'm going to open this up. Like the PIV was 20 years ago, and it's taken a while. I think most agencies are on PIV and CAC. I think there's a couple stragglers out there. What lessons can we learn from that so we implement this faster? You know, anybody want to take a swing at that?
Well, I'm not sure the PIV and CAC, oh, sorry, I'm apparently too loud for the microphone. Move it back. Yours is much quieter. It's not exactly the best corollary, right? Because you're
Right.
talking about a public key infrastructure deployed for a very specific enterprise solution. What we're talking about with mobile driver's license is essentially how do we scale that for the entire United States? So I think that, you know, one of the things that we have focused on at NIST is looking at how do we help provide better information, education, and underlying guidelines to help allow organizations to understand what does this actually mean for me to accept it, right? So how many people are familiar with the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence? It's pretty much everybody here, right? So at the NCCOE, for the benefit of those online who didn't raise their hands, you know, we try and focus on implementation of standards and technologies to allow for us to do a couple of things. One, be able to provide really good implementable recommendations and guidelines for organizations trying to put those standards into practice, but also creating a feedback loop for the standard side of the house to be able to say, hey, this is working great. This might need some tweaking. This is a complete disaster, whatever it might be. So one of the things we're really heavily focused on right now within the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence is we have a project on mobile driver's license implementation focused, to your point, on the online use case, right? So we're looking at what does it take to put these standards into practice for online deployment of a mobile driver's license for the purposes of proving identity to open a financial institution account, to use that for things like step-up authentication. So for example, you know, Ryan typically does not transfer $25,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Maybe we need to ask real quick if this is still Ryan. So we're trying to set up these understandings of what are the potential applications and uses of mobile driver's license, and then what is needed to establish trust and understanding within the relying party side of the house. For those of you who aren't familiar with that concept, it's the entity that's accepting the driver's license, right? They are accepting the risk that this technology is going to prove who you are, right? So a lot of what we're doing is focused on educating and informing and providing practical guidance to that relying party so that they understand what does all this mean, right? Like to the point of demystifying, you know, we've had conversations with relying parties where they ask us pretty basic questions like, hey, do I need to set up an API directly back to the state that issues these to actually validate them?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. The whole point of public key cryptography is that you can do that independent verification without having to have privacy, challenging things like APIs going back to the states, right? So being able to lay out the very basics of how these things work and then provide that understanding of what it provides from a security perspective, from an integrity perspective, privacy perspective, and allow them to understand how that fits within their workflows, right? So I think the key to this, it's a long way of kind of getting to the key, is I think a lot of the relying parties need to understand how this functions and understand how it fits within their use case and what value it provides to them when they're deploying this technology compared to what they're doing right now. So I think the key learning here is not necessarily kind of comparing it to PIV or PKI deployed for enterprise, but how does this fit compared to what we do today? How does it improve what we're doing today? And how does it align to kind of the organizational risk posture that the accepting organization has?
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That real quick. We do have so history can tell us a lot about how this is going to function. In the payments industry, when we went from using your physical credit card with the swiping machine and then went to using your physical credit card in a tap machine to using your device with your card loaded in it in the machine, that took some time. That didn't happen overnight. And we're in a world right now where if it doesn't happen 20 seconds ago, we're probably not going to pay attention to it anymore. Different than what we were 25, 35, 45 years ago. But that history can tell us that it's going to take some time for a few things to happen. People to use it, relying parties to accept it, trust it, and even understand what it can do for them, and the protections that it has for both sides. The payments industry, there's protections for both the user and the relying party that accepts it. And those protections are because of the digital aspect of those things. They had to learn that and see that. And now sometimes you have to have sometimes they want it electronic. On the identity side, it's the same thing. It's going to take some time for the trust to happen, me to know how I can use it and secure myself, the relying party to use it and understand how they can secure themselves, but also ensure that that privacy is protected. So this build out, this ecosystem, as it builds itself out, we have a historical model. It might not be just exactly like it, but it's very similar in the sense that it's going to take time for industry to provide the authentication devices. It's going to take time for users to actually want to interact with those devices. The standard itself is going to transform itself over time as these things become more proliferous. So we have a model that meets all of the things that Ryan just talked about. We just have to make sure that we pay attention to that and then tweak those things where they saw the differences, where they could make things improvements quicker than we did back in the payments time.
Great.
Yeah, and actually, just to add on to both of those lists is, if you look at, because I think one of the lessons learned is kind of form factor. Like if you take a PIV and put it on the back of a phone, unlike a passport, actually, it transits on a different frequency. So when you started moving to mobile, what we currently have as PIV, it's just that form factor, you can get an attachment that'll sort of put it in, but it doesn't work necessarily kind of natively. And more and more people are sort of using their smart devices. So one of the things kind of with this is, smartphones are currently predominant. You're starting to see kind of other wearables like watches and others. And I think one of the learnings that say kind of historically, to Mike's point, is, well, meet people where they are. If we make them buy special devices or hardware or things, it's going to take much, much longer, and we may miss a trend shift. The fact that this is software-based and can actually work with smart devices, primarily smartphones now, it actually can work with wearables and where things go next. It is important to sort of meet people where they are, where sort of industry is going, because I think government's ability just to unilaterally kind of dictate this is how things are, especially in this thing that affects kind of not just federal government, but kind of whole of society. We need to partner, we need to work, which is why I think this event is kind of so exciting to see this public-private partnership. And that's a lesson I think we need to take forward. I think the second point is, yes, it is a digital version of a physical thing. One of the key differences as to the point of privacy preservation is, because it is cryptographically signed, you actually don't have to go back. You don't have to verify that that information is correct because it is signed. If it is modified, if it is changed, it'll break your cryptography and that will not work. So the ability to have it where it's between you, the relying party, and the ability to verify it is both quicker, you can pre-fill things, and there's not necessarily a need to call back to third-party services for the information there because it has already been attested to by the issuing authority. And I think it's important because if you look at like, what's the difference between an Adobe PDF versus a piece of paper? Well, you can sign it. Yeah, you can wet sign a document, but wet signature is much easier to recreate than necessarily a digital signature that is signed with a PIV, which is something we've done for a long while kind of in government.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that, like, your driver's license not digitally signed. It can be modified, it can be copied, it can be, there are so many different ways to attack that physical driver's license. So even in the context of your traditional use cases, the cryptographic features that you're getting from a mobile driver's license typically exceed what you can get from security features, even on physical components that we have right now. So, you know, there are some driver's licenses that are looking to embed cryptographic capabilities, but they're not typically widespread right now. So it's even for your traditional physical use cases, it is typically a step up from a security and privacy perspective.
And I would just like to add as a final note, I know we're getting short on time,
No, we're good.
is that is the purpose of this industry day, is because you all have identity assurance requirements. You have identity requirements that you want to make sure that they're secure. And the knowledge that you gain here today to help bring back to your federal agencies to help the implementation of it, you know, we have a dedicated group of people here that are working within this infrastructure that we're trying to build out. It's basically a win-win for everybody. So by having federal agencies participate in this and start to learn more and start to implement things in a measured and, you know, consistent manner with industry, is going to help not only improve your identity assurance, but it's going to improve your customer service, and it's going to help keep your assets secure.
Great.
One
Go
other
ahead.
thing I did want to just quickly demystify as well too is we've been talking primarily about 18013 series -5, -7, but there's going to be -6. Those are the kind of ISO mobile driver's license standards. I think what, you know, throwing my NIST nerd hat on, we need to think about through all of this is one single standard is not going to make all this work, right? This is actually a layering of multiple different standards to make all of this work, right? 18013-5 and -7 do a good job of attempting to encapsulate a lot of this, but we have standards that are being integrated for how you do the presentation of the mobile driver's license online, physically. We have APIs for how they interact with the browsers, right? So how you actually collect and select and call for those mobile driver's licenses and online use cases needs to have a browser. We have standards for how you do the issuance. So how do you actually get that document from the digital repo on the issuer side into that device? So there's this layer of standards, and I have a slide that I absolutely love, but most people, it makes them want to throw their laptop out the window. But it lays out like half a dozen standards that all need to go into making all this work. So I think the important thing to think about as we go through these, it's not simply going to be 18013-5 is done, 18013-7 is done, everything's going to be okay. You have to look at that kind of layer of standards. We got the FIDO Alliance participating, and they have a absolutely essential standard that supports phishing resistance. So there's, you know, this has been, you know, something that our colleagues at ISO and other parts of standards bodies have been collaborating on for, you know, 5, almost 10 years now to help put all these pieces together, right? So I don't want to make it sound too complicated, but I also want to make sure that we understand that, you know, this is a ecosystem-wide collaboration of multiple standard bodies working in unison to try and put all this together to make this ecosystem work and function to help achieve all these different outcomes that we're looking for.
Yep. And we're going to take some questions. Is GSA going to have a couple mics with runners? While we're doing that, you know, I have a question that comes up. It came up in our prep call. What if I lose my phone isn't charged, or I lose my phone? You know, like that could be a prevent. You know, somebody gets worried about that. How do you deal with things like that? And George, I know you probably have to deal with that a lot, but maybe we can start off with you, but everybody else can kind of chip in.
So, can you give me the question again? Sorry, because I was reading.
Yeah, it was what if I lose, and I'm sure you have it today with the licenses. What if I don't have my license? I just lost it. Or in the case of the mobile phone, my phone's not charged. What am I going to do with the digital ID when I'm so dependent upon my phone and I've lost it or it's not charged?
Well, I mean, right now we're in a phase, obviously, where you have to carry your physical ID with you. So I don't think anyone's going to be stopped and bringing their physical ID right now. In fact, it's a requirement when you go to the TSA airports. You may have MDL, but you're still required to bring your physical ID as a backup. So I mean, where we are right now, it's almost I don't want to say it's a necessity, but it's a good idea to have your physical ID with you. What we're looking at is doing things in an incremental fashion. I think everybody needs to understand that we're not going to turn the lights on everywhere in one day. You need to just work at this incrementally. And that means, putting this in and this in and this in, learning how to, how your phone fits into your daily life, and the ATS trust service, the different standards that are out there for provisioning on the telephone. And if we all just keep making progress, making these incremental goals, we're going to be there before we know it. It'll be like the days are long, but the years are short. So I think everyone is just be cautiously optimistic, and just keep marching forward.
Yeah, to build on what George said, the answer to the question is very simple. No jurisdiction has a law on the books that says you don't have to carry your physical credential with you at all times.
Yeah.
If you need to use it as identity. The MDL, the digital credential is something that is being ramped up. More relying parties are starting to use it. But think about it. Until you have every relying party that you could ever interact with and need to show and prove your identity, until that happens, you're going to have that physical backup. And so the length of time it takes for every relying party to get the capability authenticated in MDL, the amount of time it takes for every jurisdiction and every customer in that jurisdiction to implement MDL and to use MDL, we're going to have the physical backup. So whether or not your phone dies, somebody takes it, what have you, you still need the physical backup. I will say this, though. If your phone dies or somebody steals it, the way the MDL works is they can't use it without it being you. That is part of that ecosystem. And so the fact that you've lost your phone or somebody stole your phone, that the capability to remove that MDL is there, and somebody has to be able to unlock your device to get to it. So the standards require that.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the probably the first most popular question that we get every time we have a mobile driver's license conversation. Someone asks, what if I lose it? And I'm not going to add anything truly insightful other than typically my response when that question gets asked is, what happens when you lose your driver's license today? Right? What happens when I leave my driver's license or my wallet in a cab or an Uber or something like that? The potential repercussions and damage from losing a physical driver's license are substantial. Like if you go listen to some of the horror stories of people who have had their identity stolen because they lost their driver's license, they left it at the bar, they left it wherever. It is very hard to cut that off. It's very hard to, you can't remotely revoke a physical driver's license. What you can do is you can remotely revoke a mobile driver's license. So even the scale and the long tail of potential repercussions from losing your phone are not anywhere near as impactful as the potential damage that can be done from losing a physical driver's license.
Maybe a parallel is you can do mobile payments, but you still got to keep your credit card on you because that one time not everybody has it, right? Fantastic. Any questions out there for this esteemed panel? You all get enough coffee? There we got one up here. We got a couple. Okay.
Going first. Good morning. Are you all working yet with USCIS to get the mobile driver's license added to the I-9 list? Because I was just looking online and I'm seeing that, like, I think as far as accelerating adoption, being able to use it for identity proofing, on that list would go a long way.
Didn't quite hear the question. I'm sorry. Yeah, but here's what I think I heard. Are we working with USCIS to get the mobile driver license added to the I-9 list? We are interacting with almost every federal agency who has need for identity. what they do with their policies, we're trying to let them know what these things are, how they work, how they're issued, and then allow them to make decisions on their policies based on the education that we've given them. So are we working specifically with USCIS to add it to the I-9? Not necessarily. We're working with all of them to let them know what the states are doing, how they issue credentials, both physical and digital, and then allow them to make their policies from there.
Great. We had another question up here. Oh, you're not, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I can just say broadly, we're supporting DHS components and just try to understand sort of the benefits and the risks of this technology.
And
Another
states.
question up here? Yeah. We got another one? There you go. It's right here. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, Devin Fenster. I'm with SSA. Excellent panels, thank you. We know that the concept of an MDL goes well beyond driver's licenses, right? And verifying and authenticating a person's authority to drive. And there are a lot of other types of identity-related documents that are not necessarily something would store in a wallet, but would benefit from cryptographic verification. And these are documents like birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, in the case of benefits, proof of beneficiary status, social security numbers, right? Those types of documents. Where do you see the mDL standard fitting into those kinds of documents that are issued from authoritative sources?
So I can okay, so I think there's a couple of things here, right? Number one, MDL is one example of what's called a mobile document, which is a more generic standard that's also produced by ISO that basically says, all right, we created an MDL, which is very specific to the driver's license space. But now we've got MDoc over here, which can be any digital document with any kind of, set of structured data related to that. So we have MDoc. I'm also going to say it. We've got W3C verifiable credential digital data model, right? We have a number of different credential formats out there that can all kind of support different deployments of these different technologies. I think the big question is, how do we take and establish the necessary data structures, the necessary schemas to help allow for organizations to take whatever their physical document is and transition it to a data, right? And transition it to whether it's an MDoc or VC, whatever it is, something that can be deployed in a very similar manner to mobile driver's license. So in practice, I think we can see a world of pretty much anything that's a digital document or a digital, proof or attestation being transitioned out of some kind of a physical card into a digital version. The big question is, as those organizations that are responsible for this start to evaluate what makes sense for them, they're going to have to go through like a plethora of understandings to try and decide, what is our data format going to look like? What credential model are we going to choose? How are we going to establish this in a way that's consistent and can be applied across an entire ecosystem? Because what you definitely don't want is like, one state picking, W3 VCDM for their birth certificates and someone else picking MDoc and then not having a consistent data schema or structure for it. So there's like a responsibility, a broader coordination responsibility that needs to be filled in there to help those organizations consistently apply this, similar to what ISO has done for the mobile driver's license world, right? So you need to have those kind of entities and organizations, and they're out there. Organizations like NAFSIS and places like they're starting to think through these processes. But that next step is really, how do we coordinate all the necessary underlying components to make sure what we produce is not just cryptographically verifiable, but it's interoperable so that, whether I'm born in California or I'm born in Louisiana, if I get a digital birth certificate, it should work and be accepted anywhere. The other thing that we've looked at a lot as well too is where can we create interoperability layers? So if you have differences in like someone choosing W3CVC versus MDoc, how can you create presentation layers that are credential agnostic so that you can still support interoperability at the relying party level and the verifier level to make sure that you don't have to have a different verifier for like every document or every credential model that comes out. So that's a lot of the effort that we're focusing on today. But
yes, and the one thing that matters the most in all of this. The technology can be done in such a way that things can work. There's no doubt that this ecosystem can be built out in a way that credentials can be used in different genres. That can happen. But when you start doing that, you confuse the customer that's actually using it. So when the ecosystem also has to keep in mind, and this is something that's very crucial to the acceptance of digital credentials in any genre. If a customer doesn't understand it, and if the customer can't use it, or it's hard to use, or they have to make decisions on whether I use this one this time or this one next time, or what context am I in, it's going to make it very difficult to have adoption. People won't use it if it's not convenient, if it's not easy. So one of the layers that we have to talk about in this ecosystem, which we are, is when you do all of that, when you get an MDoc or you get a WC3 or whatever you decide to use, how is that going to interact with those other documents that are sitting in their mobile wallet? And how do they know when to use what? And so we have to be careful that we don't create a technology that is so cumbersome that it never gets adopted. So that piece has to also be part of this ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in practice, the end user should never know or care whether they've got an MDoc or a W3 VC. It should just be something that works ideally in their wallet of choice, as opposed to having one wallet, one credential pairs that result in 35 wallets on your phone. If you want 35, you should be able to have them. But ideally, we should have that capability for each wallet to be able to support multiple credential types, present multiple credential types, because that is how you avoid the situation where the end user is trying to flip around to 5 different apps to figure out what the right credential is. So I think, the more we can move towards those standards being able to be supported in one place with one set of convenient interactions, the better off we're going to be.
We got a question over here.
Sure. Sorry. AJ Amlani, I'm the CEO of Aware out of Boston. There seems to be a 2-step process towards any identity verification using documents in a physical world. The first one is assessing whether or not the document is in fact legitimate. The second one is actually assessing whether or not the person's face matches the photo on the document. There seems to be a significant amount of work being done on many of the standards around the creation of the documents, the issuance of the documents, and the reading of the documents. There seems to be very little being done on the face matching element of an identity verification, even though it's a fundamental core element of an identity verification. What is the journey from here to where we need to go to make sure that the face match component of it also has very rigorous standards that can also interoperate between multiple entities and make it very convenient and easy for a customer while also maintaining security?
So I mean, I would make the argument there's actually a lot going on when it comes to the face matching component, probably way more than what's being done for like the document scanning and document authentication.
Yeah.
But, we have an entire program at NIST, the face recognition vendor testing program that's been around for, I don't know how long, but a long time, where you can test and evaluate face recognition algorithms and face matching algorithms. We've got hundreds of vendors that have probably been through that at this point in time. We have metrics that we've established in our digital identity guidelines for face matching and performance matching. And our colleagues at DHS have been doing a ton of really good work as well too.
Yeah, I think I was just going to echo what Ryan's saying. That's, we have active work now on one-to-one selfie match, actually from a smartphone capture. So there's been a lot of standards work, and as well as active test and evaluation in matching specifically.
Great. I think we got some virtual questions. Does somebody want to read them off to me?
Sure, Tom. This is Chris, your virtual host. We have a question just on general data breach processes. What happens if a data breach occurs? Is it incumbent on the individual to have monitoring?
Did I hear data breach?
Data breach. Yep.
Okay. I'll start this one and you can follow if you need. So today, that's the beauty of the digital credential, is it's used offline. The data that's part of the MDL that resides with the issuing authority. And therefore, the data breaches that occur, if they were to occur, would not be in a new database, because there is no new database. For the Digital Trust Service, that is just a list of public keys. They're public. You get the public keys, and you've really, all you've got is the ability to authenticate an MDL issued by that issuing authority. So you don't have any personal data, PII, in the Digital Trust Service. So all of the PII still resides in the exact same places in all of the different jurisdictions that they reside today. So data breaches, whatever those would be, sorry, I'm not sure if you were talking to me or not.
I was getting the we're done
Oh.
phase, so I was getting the done look.
Data breaches are as today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna push the envelope for one more minute and at the expense of potentially getting yelled at. I think we need to be clear that like the idea that data breaches can happen anywhere, right? And mobile driver's license and verifiable digital credentials do not eliminate the fact that PII is in lots of different places. It changes where you store it from a credential perspective, it changes how you present it. But at the end of the day, if you are a lying party that needs that information in order to conduct a business transaction, you're still getting that PII. And you still have a responsibility to protect it once you've gotten it. And you have a responsibility to make sure it's stored appropriately. So MDL does not eliminate data breaches or make them potentially less impactful. It just changes the algorithm as far as how the presentation.
Great. Well, I think we're getting the hook officially. So, thank the panel, and we'll get off the stage. Thank you all.